The monthly financial review meeting happened every first Tuesday of the month in our conference room, and this particular Tuesday in October my business partner Marcus sat across from me with spreadsheets printed out showing 3 straight months of declining revenue that made my stomach turn. "We need to talk about the trajectory of this company," he said with this grave expression that made it seem like we were on the verge of bankruptcy. I looked at the numbers he was showing me and felt genuine fear for the first time since we had started Bennett-Cross Solutions 8 years ago, because according to these reports we had lost 4 major clients in the past quarter and our revenue had dropped by nearly 40%. My name is David Bennett and I'm 41 years old, and 8 years ago my friend from business school Marcus Cross and I started a consulting firm that helped mid-size companies optimize their operations and reduce costs. We had built the business from absolutely nothing into a successful firm with 15 employees and annual revenue that had been consistently around $3.2 million for the past 3 years. Or at least that was what I thought until Marcus showed me these devastating financial reports. Marcus handled most of the day-to-day operations and client relationships while I focused more on the actual consulting work and managing our team of analysts and consultants. It was a partnership that had worked beautifully for years because our skills complemented each other perfectly, with Marcus being the smooth-talking relationship builder and me being the technical problem solver who could dig into a company's processes and find ways to save them money. We had started the business as equal 50-50 partners, putting in equal amounts of startup capital and splitting all profits down the middle, and for 8 years it had been one of the best professional relationships of my life. Marcus was not just my business partner but genuinely one of my closest friends, someone I trusted completely with both the business and personal aspects of my life, which made what eventually happened so much more devastating than just a financial betrayal. As I sat there looking at the spreadsheets Marcus had prepared, I felt this wave of panic washing over me because losing 40% of our revenue in 3 months was catastrophic for a firm our size. I asked him what had happened with these major clients we had supposedly lost, and he explained that 2 of them had gone with larger consulting firms that could offer more services, 1 had decided to handle their optimization internally, and the 4th had simply stopped responding to our proposals and communications. He said we needed to seriously consider downsizing the team and cutting costs wherever possible if we wanted to survive the next 6 months, and he suggested we might need to let go of 5 or 6 employees to bring our overhead down to a sustainable level. I felt sick at the thought of laying off people who had been loyal to our company for years, people who had families and mortgages and were depending on their paychecks from us, but if the numbers Marcus was showing me were accurate then we genuinely might not have a choice. That night I went home to my wife Rachel and told her about the financial crisis we were facing, and she could see how stressed and worried I was about potentially having to lay off half our staff. She asked me if I was absolutely sure the numbers were correct, and I told her Marcus had prepared the reports himself and he was meticulous about financial tracking, so I had no reason to doubt the accuracy of what he was showing me. Rachel suggested I should do my own independent review of the finances just to be absolutely certain before we made any drastic decisions about layoffs, and even though I trusted Marcus completely, I agreed that it made sense to verify the numbers myself before we started firing people. The next day I told Marcus I wanted to spend a few days going through all our financial records and client files to see if there were any opportunities to win back the clients we had lost or find new revenue streams we had not explored yet. He seemed slightly uncomfortable with this request but agreed it was a good idea, saying he would pull together all the relevant files and documents for me to review. That weekend I spent both Saturday and Sunday in our office going through every financial record, every client contract, every invoice and payment record we had for the past year, and what I found made absolutely no sense when compared to the reports Marcus had shown me. According to our actual bank statements and client invoicing records, we had not lost 4 major clients in the past quarter at all. In fact, we were still actively working with 3 of them and sending them monthly invoices that were being paid on time. The 4th client that Marcus claimed had stopped responding to us had actually increased their contract with us 2 months ago, expanding from a $50,000 annual engagement to a $75,000 one, but none of this was reflected in the financial reports Marcus had prepared. I spent another several hours digging deeper into our records and discovered something even more disturbing, which was that there were clients paying us for services that were not showing up in our revenue reports at all. I found bank deposits from companies I recognized as clients totaling almost $400,000 over the past 6 months that somehow were not reflected in any of the financial statements Marcus had been preparing for our monthly reviews. My first thought was that Marcus had made some kind of accounting error and had accidentally been leaving certain revenue streams out of his reports, but as I dug deeper I realized this was not just an error but something far more systematic and deliberate. I decided to call one of the clients that Marcus claimed we had lost, a manufacturing company called Precision Components that we had been working with for 3 years, and when I got the CEO on the phone and explained I was calling to see if there was anything we could do to win back their business, he sounded completely confused. He told me they had not left Bennett-Cross Solutions at all and were very happy with the work we were doing for them, and in fact they had just signed a renewal contract with Marcus last month to continue our engagement for another year. I felt this cold sensation spreading through my chest as I realized Marcus had been lying to me about losing this client, but I still did not understand why he would do such a thing or what he possibly had to gain from it. I called the other 3 clients that Marcus had claimed we lost and got similar responses from all of them. They were all still working with us and had no idea what I was talking about when I mentioned that we thought they had left. One of them even said they had been so impressed with our recent work that they had recommended us to 2 other companies in their industry, which was exactly the opposite of what Marcus had been telling me was happening. By Sunday evening I had uncovered enough discrepancies that I knew something seriously wrong was happening, but I still could not figure out what Marcus's endgame was or why he would be lying to me about the financial health of our own company. I decided I needed to bring in an outside accountant to do a full forensic audit of our books before I confronted Marcus about what I had found, because I wanted to make sure I had all the facts and evidence before I made any accusations against my business partner of 8 years. I contacted a forensic accountant I knew from my MBA program named Jennifer Chin, and I explained the situation to her without mentioning Marcus's name initially, just laying out the discrepancies I had found between the bank records and the financial reports. She agreed to take on the audit and said she could start immediately, and I gave her access to all our financial systems and records with the excuse to Marcus that I had hired a consultant to help us identify cost-saving opportunities given our supposedly dire financial situation. Marcus seemed nervous about this but could not really object without seeming suspicious, so he agreed and said he would cooperate fully with whatever Jennifer needed. Jennifer worked incredibly fast, and within just 3 days she called me and asked me to meet her at a coffee shop away from the office because she said what she had found was serious enough that we needed to discuss it privately before anyone else knew about it. When I met her that Thursday afternoon she had printouts and documentation that she spread across the table between us, and she told me in a quiet, serious voice that my business partner had been systematically stealing from the company for at least the past 18 months and possibly longer. She explained that Marcus had set up a separate consulting company under a slightly different name, Bennett-Cross Consulting Group compared to our Bennett-Cross Solutions, and he had been using that entity to bid on the same projects our company was bidding on. He was essentially competing against our own company using insider information he had about our pricing and strategies, and when his separate company won these contracts he would tell me that the client had chosen to go with a competitor. Jennifer showed me documentation of at least 7 major contracts over the past 18 months where Marcus's secret company had bid against us and won the work, representing roughly $800,000 in revenue that should have come to our partnership but instead went entirely to him. But it was even worse than just competing against us, because Jennifer had also discovered that Marcus had been diverting some of our existing clients to his new company by telling them that Bennett-Cross Solutions was going out of business but he was starting a new firm and could continue serving them under the new entity. He had managed to move 3 of our long-term clients worth about $200,000 in annual revenue to his secret company without me ever knowing they had left, and he had covered up the loss of that revenue by keeping them in our books as if they were still clients while actually invoicing them through his separate company. The financial reports showing declining revenue were fabricated specifically to make me think our company was failing and to justify cutting costs and laying off employees, which would have weakened our legitimate business even further and made it easier for him to continue stealing clients. I sat there in that coffee shop feeling like I might actually throw up as Jennifer continued explaining the extent of Marcus's fraud, and I realized this man I had trusted completely and considered one of my closest friends had been systematically destroying our business for his own profit. Jennifer said I needed to consult with a lawyer immediately because what Marcus had done was serious enough to warrant both civil lawsuits and potentially criminal charges for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. She also warned me that if Marcus realized I was onto him, he might try to destroy evidence or move money around to hide his tracks, so I needed to act quickly and decisively to protect myself and the company. I called my attorney that same afternoon, a business lawyer named Robert Sullivan who had helped us set up the partnership agreement 8 years ago when Marcus and I first started the company. I explained everything Jennifer had found and asked him what my options were, and he said the first priority was to immediately revoke Marcus's access to our bank accounts and financial systems to prevent him from moving or hiding any more money. He also said I needed to call an emergency board meeting, which in our case was just the 2 partners since we did not have outside board members, and formally present the evidence of Marcus's fraud and theft. Robert said that based on what Jennifer had found, I had grounds to immediately terminate Marcus as a partner and employee for cause, which meant he would not be entitled to any severance or buyout of his partnership stake since he had violated his fiduciary duties so egregiously. That evening I changed all the passwords and access codes for our banking and financial systems so Marcus could no longer get into them, and I sent him an email requesting an emergency partner meeting the next morning at 8 a.m. with our attorney present. He responded asking what the meeting was about and saying he had client calls scheduled that morning, but I just replied that it was urgent and non-negotiable and he needed to clear his schedule. The meeting the next morning was one of the hardest things I have ever had to do in my professional life, because I still had this part of me that wanted to believe there was some explanation for everything Jennifer had found that would make Marcus not be the villain in this story. He walked into the conference room and immediately looked suspicious when he saw Robert sitting there with legal pads and documentation spread out in front of him, and he asked what was going on. I told him to sit down and then I explained that I had hired a forensic accountant to review our finances and she had uncovered evidence of significant fraud and theft. Marcus's face went completely white and he started to stand up saying he did not need to listen to false accusations, but Robert told him to sit back down because if he left this meeting we would immediately file for a restraining order and report everything to the police. Marcus sat back down and I started going through all the evidence Jennifer had compiled, showing him the documentation of his secret company Bennett-Cross Consulting Group, the contracts where he had bid against us using insider information, the clients he had diverted to his new firm while telling me they had chosen competitors. With each piece of evidence his face became more ashen and his denials became weaker, until finally he just put his head in his hands and stopped talking altogether. I asked him why he had done this, why he had decided to betray our partnership and steal from the company we had built together, and at first he would not answer. Then finally he said in this quiet voice that he felt he deserved more than 50% of the profits because he was the one bringing in all the clients and handling all the relationship management while I just did the technical work, and he thought it was unfair that we split everything equally when he was doing what he considered the harder and more valuable work. I was so angry I could barely speak because this man had been my friend for over a decade and my business partner for 8 years, and instead of coming to me and having an honest conversation about feeling undervalued, he had chosen to systematically steal from me and destroy the business we had built together. Robert explained to Marcus that based on the evidence of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, we were terminating him immediately as both partner and employee for cause, which meant he would forfeit his entire partnership stake and receive no buyout or severance. Marcus tried to argue that we could not legally do that, but Robert pointed out that our partnership agreement had very specific clauses about conduct that justified termination for cause, and fraud and theft definitely qualified. Marcus asked if we were going to file criminal charges against him, and Robert said that would depend on whether Marcus cooperated fully with returning the stolen money and clients and unwinding his fraudulent competing business. We gave him 48 hours to provide a complete accounting of all money he had taken through his secret company and to transfer back all the clients he had diverted, and we said if he cooperated fully we would consider limiting our action to civil litigation rather than pursuing criminal fraud charges. He left that meeting looking completely defeated, and I sat there in the empty conference room afterward feeling this strange mix of rage and grief because I had lost not just a business partner but someone I had considered family. Over the next several weeks Marcus did cooperate with returning clients and providing financial documentation, though I suspect he hid some of what he had taken because the numbers never quite added up completely. Our attorney filed a civil lawsuit against him for breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and conversion of company assets, and we also sued his secret company Bennett-Cross Consulting Group to shut it down and recover damages. The legal process took almost a year to fully resolve, but in the end we won a judgment against Marcus for $1.2 million, which represented the stolen revenue plus damages and legal fees. He was forced to declare bankruptcy and his secret company was dissolved, and the 3 clients he had diverted all came back to Bennett-Cross Solutions once they understood what had actually happened. I had to rebrand our company and remove Marcus's name entirely, so Bennett-Cross Solutions became Bennett Strategic Consulting, and I brought in a new partner who I vetted extremely carefully and who brought fresh energy and ideas to the business. The employees never had to be laid off because once we uncovered Marcus's fraud, our actual financial position was much stronger than he had been claiming, and in fact we were able to give everyone raises once we recovered the stolen money. The hardest part was not the financial impact or even the business disruption, but rather the complete betrayal of trust by someone I had considered one of my closest friends for over a decade. Marcus and I had been in each other's weddings, had celebrated the births of each other's children, had supported each other through family deaths and personal crises, and he had thrown all of that away because he felt entitled to a bigger share of profits and was too cowardly to just have an honest conversation about it. I learned some painful lessons from this experience about trust and verification, about the importance of maintaining independent oversight even with partners you trust completely, and about how greed and resentment can corrupt even people you think you know well. I also learned that you can never really know what is going on inside someone else's head, and that people are capable of justifying almost any behavior to themselves if they feel aggrieved or entitled. 3 years after everything happened, I ran into Marcus at a professional conference, and it was incredibly awkward because we both saw each other across the room but neither of us knew whether to acknowledge the other. Finally he came over and asked if we could talk privately for a few minutes, and even though I did not really want to, I agreed because I was curious what he possibly had to say to me after everything. He told me he was working as an independent consultant now, struggling to rebuild his career after the bankruptcy and the lawsuit, and he said he wanted to apologize for what he had done and explain that he had been going through some personal issues at the time that had clouded his judgment. I just looked at him and said that personal issues were not an excuse for systematic fraud and betrayal, and that the Marcus I thought I knew would never have done what he did regardless of what personal problems he was facing. He did not have a response to that, and after an uncomfortable silence he just said he hoped someday I could forgive him, and I told him honestly that forgiveness was not something I was interested in because it would not change what happened or give me back the trust and friendship we had lost. We parted ways after that and I have not seen or spoken to him since, and I honestly hope I never do because seeing him just brings back all the anger and hurt from discovering that the person I trusted most in my professional life had been actively working to destroy everything we had built together. The company is doing well now, actually better than it ever did when Marcus was involved because my new partner brings skills and integrity that complement rather than compete with what I bring to the business. We have grown to 25 employees and annual revenue of over $5 million, and we have built systems and oversight that would make it much harder for anyone to commit the kind of fraud Marcus got away with for so long. But I am also much more cautious now about who I trust and how much access I give people to the financial and operational aspects of the business, because I learned the hard way that trust without verification is just an invitation for betrayal. Some people will take advantage of your trust and goodwill if they think they can get away with it, and the only protection is to maintain checks and balances even with people you consider friends and partners. If there is one lesson I want people to take from my experience, it is this. Never assume that friendship or history with someone means they will not betray you if they feel they have something to gain from it. Always maintain independent oversight of your finances and operations. Always verify important information rather than just accepting what partners or employees tell you, and always be willing to ask hard questions even when it feels awkward or like you are questioning someone's integrity. Because in the end, the temporary awkwardness of verification is nothing compared to the devastating impact of discovering that someone you trusted completely has been systematically stealing from you and destroying what you built together. Marcus taught me that lesson in the most painful way possible, and while I wish I had never had to learn it, I am grateful that I discovered his fraud when I did before he could do even more damage to the business and the employees who depended on it. What would you do if you discovered your partner was running a secret competing company?